What's it like growing up on Jersey?
It was great. It's a really safe place. I grew up on the west of the island, so I was really close to the beaches there. I mean, you're never that far from a beach in Jersey. It's really scenic and beautiful, and it's quite quaint. I had a great childhood. By the time I was about 16, though, I really wanted to escape, and I had that, when you rebel against the place, where you're from. If that, in my case, it was a small island, but it could have been a small town where you just feel like it has nothing to offer you. There was no, cinema culture obviously there, or art or big music scene. So I kind of, when I went to university, I kind of turned my back on the island, and it was only through making the film that I kind of fell in love with it again.
In captivity, some go insane.
There is speculation that the disappearance is connected to the unsolved murders of 3 other girls over the past 4 years.
In some way, because the film was originally inspired, or loosely inspired, by a true crime case that actually made quite a big impact on my childhood imagination when I grew up, even though it was 10 or 20 years after those crimes happened. But a way to sort of bridge the gap and not just do a kind of, like a straight genre film, was to mine my own impressions of the island, both good and bad, so the sense of freedom I felt that there was, and that landscape, and it being the site of a romance, and, I could go back to my experiences, but equally, the feeling that I was, a bit imprisoned on the island. I heightened them a lot through, and amplified them through the sort of archetypes of like fairy tales. But definitely that feeling of wanting to escape. And then also that you would, you'd have these, it's a very affluent island, and, all the hedges are like neatly trimmed, and, but it's also, it was that contradiction, I suppose, of feeling that I had, and how incongruous it was to have this island that seemed very safe and very quaint, but you had these crimes that were committed there, and also you'd have, these. It seemed every family seemed very wholesome, but sometimes when I went into a friend's house, I could also see something that was very different to my family, and lots of families are dysfunctional, and so I was interested in all of that, and exploring those contradictory feelings.
You're wounded. I can fix that.
Did you have like a prince or princess charming, not necessarily romantically, but a character like Pascal in your life that made you feel like you were more than where you were stuck?
That's a good question. I mean, I don't know. I think I've riffed off of a few friends. I haven't told them this, but a bit of my dad. My dad used to go and shoot rabbits on the golf course, which is where I got that from Pascal, and he's got quite an irreverent sense of humour. But he was also part of that kind of established world that I didn't respond to so much. Like for example, going back to your previous question about whether anything that kind of more directly mirrored my own experience, like I was kicked out of a golf club for wearing black jeans. And this was when I was like 8 or 9 years old, and I thought that was such a cruel thing to do to a kid. I mean, even when I was, I suppose I was 9 years old, I thought that's so strange to do that, and I had to like leave. And I wanted to like pick up this golf club that I saw and like smash it into the ground. That kind of, that I had that feeling, and it was an opportunity in the film to sort of have that moment.
Sweetheart, you can't just change the rules because someone's shown an interest. Maybe I've been too soft on you.
You're a good person, Lowell.
You don't know me.
I know that people make mistakes.
In some ways, the film is about a woman that has to re-engage with her animal instincts to escape the prison that she's found herself in. And that's a positive thing to a certain degree, because she's kind of abolished that side of herself, and that side of yourself can also contain, let's say, negative emotions as well, but then it's not like just I don't want it to be a simplistic endorsement of like, that's also filled with, you know, lots of, that's dangerous as well if you just engage with yourself on that way. And I suppose it's like, yeah, the question in the film is how everyone has to navigate through that in their own particular way, like in terms of how much of your morality you take on board, your super ego, and how much you just sort of listen to your body and let that guide you.
It might be on the film set itself where that balance plays out a little bit as well, though, I imagine, like particularly with a first-time director who's had funding from companies to help make this film. Your kind of artistic instinct is, I imagine, having to be domesticated a little bit just by sheer things like schedule or having to shoot things under a certain budget in a certain time. And we already spoke before we started recording about the kind of the old-fashioned auteur and how they felt a little perhaps wilder and freer to be more artistically themselves. I mean, how are you dealing with that so far, that feeling that you're working with somebody else's money and somebody else's time?
I mean, in some ways it feels, I mean, also though, the BFI and Film 4, you know, and other public funders in the UK, there's not like a big financial imperative, at least for your first films, they're never going to force me to cast a particular actor because they're going to, you know, it's easier to sell that movie. They were very behind working with, you know, for Jessie it was her first film role. You know, they do want, if anything, they're encouraging you to make the most interesting version of your film, and they don't want it to be compromised. I almost think you're going to be more compromised within the, you know, working within the market, because there are more imperatives there because your film's definitely got to sell and it's definitely got to make money. So I didn't feel any pressure to sort of soften any aspect of it. That never really, if anything, maybe it was the opposite, that they were encouraging me to like pursue certain ideas that were like latent in the script, and they thought were like encouraging me to like dig into the deepest versions of those themes. I suppose I did engage with it in terms of it being a genre film. Like for me, genre used to be a kind of dirty word when I was at film school. Not because of the culture of the film school, just for me, I was like a real film snob. Right. I was the guy watching like, you know, the Bellatar's most, you know, obscure movie, like watch Satan Tango once a month, and I really just couldn't understand why, you know, genre films were an interesting way to do it. And it was only after sort of graduating and looking at the terrain of the film industry, and I thought, wow, it's really hard for art house cinema. And then it was at that same time that I looked back at a lot of 70s films, the films that kind of made me sort of want to be a director, like, you know, Chinatown and Dog Day Afternoon and The Godfather and The Conversation. And I realized all of these movies that we call auteur films, they're kind of elevated genre films. And then I kind of, I became much more accustomed to it, and I saw it could be, my analogy that I gave someone recently is that genre can just be like a guitar amp. You know, you can still write a beautiful, character-focused folk song, but by, you know, doing it within a genre story format, you're like plugging into a guitar amp, so you're going from folk to rock.
I'm not who I say I am. I know you'll understand. Because we're the same.